alarms, as some can be affordable. Educate children around you. Take time to explain the dangers of fire and teach them the safety protocols and numbers to call in case of emergencies. Be wary of electrical appliances. They may make our lives easier, but they can be dangerous when they become faulty. Ensure a professional repairs or helps with the installation of home appliances. Do not make illegal power connections. Exercise caution when cooking. As you prepare your food, please stay close by. Resist the urge to take a nap or do other things whilst cooking. Also, ensure flammable substances are not close to your burner. Do not store fuel or diesel at home. Many fires have started because of petroleum products being stored in the homes of many Nigerians. Get a fire extinguisher. A fire extinguisher will go a long way to either reduce the spread or stop a fire if caught early. Keep fire-causing tools and items safe in storage. And finally, regular training, reminders, and updates to both family and staff members will keep individuals alert to safety protocols. Know the emergency numbers to call.
Different ideologies,
different perspectives.
Share your views on the sunny side.
92.3 Nigeria Info.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
It's a beautiful Monday afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to the sunny side. This is your number one talk news and sports radio station here in Port Harcourt. I'm Gabriella, welcoming you to a brand new week in the month of October. We've come to the 18th day of the month, and today we're going to kickstart a conversation with climate change. That is a conversation, in my opinion, we do not have as often and as much as we should. So today we're going to kickstart a conversation on the show with climate change. At 1 o'clock, the news updates. At 1:30, we connect you to BBC's Talk Your Own. And I'll be joined by your series on Family Matters at 2 o'clock. You're welcome once again to the show.
Different ideologies,
different perspectives.
Share your views on the sunny side.
92.3 Nigeria Info.
Let's talk.
Let's talk.
So, according to reports, Nigeria has adopted nature-based solutions to tackle climate change. Now, the Vice President of the African Global Legislators Organization for a Balanced Environment, Honorable Sam Onibo, he disclosed this during an occasion of the launch of the research works on the Great Green Wall Initiative and the Natural Capital Accounting over the weekend in Abuja. Now, this lawmaker also represents the North-South Federal Constituency in the House of Reps, also said that the country has taken the very important step of applying nature-based solutions to mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change through reducing emissions, for instance, from forest degradation and deforestation, and so many other initiative programs. And he also said that global conversations on the need for governments, for cities, regions, businesses, private organizations, etc., to commit to increased action so as to address the impacts of climate change have picked up recently. And Nigeria is not left out. We ought to, begin to pick up the conversation and catch up with where the world is right now as regards climate change. You would find that in so many ways our environment has been affected by climate change. Our atmosphere has been affected. Our seasons have been altered because of climate change. How can we improve this and make this better? To help us understand this and more, I've got with me via telephone, joining us for this conversation, Blessing Allen Adebayo. She's an international development professional for climate change. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good afternoon, Gabriella.
Thank you so much for making time to join me on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me here to talk about this. Good afternoon. It's good to be here with you, Gabriella.
All right. So let's start the conversation with how climate change has affected us over the years, in Nigeria specifically.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's a very good question. How has climate change affected us over the year? But you'd be surprised, first of all, Gabriella, to find out that people do not even understand what exactly climate change is. So before I go into how it has affected us over the years, I'd like to just speak in simple terms about what exactly climate change is and what are the possible causes of climate change. So in simple terms, climate change is like a long-term shift in the temperature and weather patterns. It usually occurs naturally in the world. So it means that over thousands of years, the climate is actually going to change. However, there are a few practices and human activities that aggravate the process of climate change.
Right.
Okay. And some of those practices, we could talk about them later, but it has very, very huge impact on our world. How has it affected us, especially in Nigeria? So I'll speak majorly about the tropics. So it affects our crops, for instance. When the temperature rises so high, when you have very high temperature, it now changes the seasonal pattern, and you have longer months of drought and uneven plant floods that were not planned, uneven patterns of flooding and rainfall. So this affects the crops over time. It brings heat waves in increasing amounts of quantities that cannot really be explained, can cause diseases, parasites and diseases that would usually not thrive in our location and in our climate, are now able to thrive better. And one of the biggest impacts it also has for us, that Nigeria is along the coastline. We are connected to the ocean. So we are losing our aquatic life because the normal patterns of reproduction, migration that these animals have to go through to reproduce is being affected by the temperature because they follow such patterns. And this is generally causing productivity loss in our agricultural sector. Health is affecting our health because we have diseases that we cannot explain. Long spells of heat and dryness. We are losing our infrastructure and our livelihood when we have flooding. If you have noticed this year, the flood patterns in the last 5-6 years in the country have been getting worse, and this year they have been flooding in different parts of the world, and then of the country, and then desertification, desert encroachment. If you look at the map, if you're able to look at the map of how much desert we have in the country, it keeps growing because we are cutting down trees, and desertification is eroding, especially in the northern part of the country. So these are just a few of the things that we're suffering, and it affects every single person. So we're going through long spells of heat. Everyone is being affected. You come out and say, why is the sun so? Why is there so much heat? So these are just a few of the things that are the effects of climate change. Yeah.
Now, do you think that perhaps the problem is that we do not know the impact of, for instance, one of the problems you mentioned, which is, cutting down our trees? Do you think as Nigerians, we do not know the effect of that? Do you think that's what has caused for what has happened right now?
Okay, so there are several ways to respond to the question. I could quickly say, no, we don't know the impact. But then it's a complicated question that has various answers. So for Nigerians, for instance, cutting down trees for several people is, for some people who need fossil fuel, firewood to survive, it is the available fuel that they know about, and it is their livelihood. It is cheaper, it is available, it is what they have done, it is habit, it is economy, it is poverty. There's several reasons for that. While some of the companies that are really cutting down trees and selling lots of them, it is also the economics of it. And there's no legal instrument to prevent and hold people accountable for some of the actions that they take. And you know that where there is no law, all kinds of actions thrive. So there is the need for creating affordable alternatives for people who these are the only options that they have for fuel. And there's also the need to create instruments and create awareness also, create the instruments to legally let people know what should be done, and then create awareness. And truthfully, the activities that aggravate climate change, there are a lot of them that we have lived with for years. So, for instance, burning of fossil fuels, gasoline. This is what has been available for us for centuries. We have built our economy around burning fuel. We built our economy around burning trees. The only method that we know to planting or to agriculture is clearing out the forest. We haven't really been exposed and educated about agroforestry, that agriculture can function within the forest, and so there is a shortage of awareness, lack of awareness, and there's the economics of it. There is the lack of alternative. So those would be the responses to that question.
All right. Would like that you join the conversation right now. The phone lines are open. Whatever questions or thoughts you have, you can obviously share. The number to call is 0817 923 0002, 0817 923 0003. You can also call 0817 923 0007 or 0817 923 0009. The WhatsApp number is 0809 0306416. Now, let me come back to you, Blessing. Let's talk about these nature-based solutions being adopted right now to tackle climate change in Nigeria. Do you think this would help in the long run fight the impacts that we're currently suffering across the nation?
So, in terms of what has been documented, I think it is such a fantastic job. What has been documented, what the plan is, what the strategy looks like, it is beautiful, and it looks very sustainable, and it will help in the long run. Just to say just to give you an inkling as to what the plan is. So, climate change is caused by greenhouse emissions. Okay, so what that means is that when most of the greenhouse emissions are carbon dioxide and methane, those are like the major emissions. So if we can curtail this to carbon dioxide and methane, we can mitigate or reduce the impact of climate change. What do they do? So when carbon dioxide and methane are released into the atmosphere in high quantity, it creates something like a blanket around the earth and traps the heat from the sun. So the heat is no longer deflected into space. It goes direct. It is left here. It goes directly into our earth, and we feel the consequences. So what the solution that it is providing is to reduce activities that lead to carbon dioxide and methane emissions. So they're using the nature-based solutions known as REDD+. The REDD+ is reducing emissions from deforestation, forest degradation, and the role of conservation, sustainable management of forests, and to enhance carbon shock. So what it is trying to do, what the bill is doing is it is identifying activities that lead to carbon and methane emissions. And working around reducing those activities over time. And these activities are contributed by everybody, by government institutions, private sector companies, industry, individuals, homes, buildings, you and I. Everybody contributes to this. So it is drawing up a sustainable strategy to reduce this over time, and hopefully by the year between 2050 and 2070, we could get to the point of zero carbon emission. Just to say that no country has achieved this at this point, but several countries are planning to do it, and we are trying to achieve this by 2070.
So how do you think that, because again, this, like you've explained, is obviously for the professionals, in your field, but I want us to bring the conversation down to us as individual Nigerians. How do you think we can become more responsible, in layman's terms, to help in the fights, against this decline? of our climate here. What are the lifestyle changes that we'll need to make as individuals being responsible for our environment?
Okay. So I will mention some of the lifestyle changes, but I know that as soon as I mention them, some people are going to scream and say this is not possible. So I will want to say that part of the objectives of this climate change bill is to strengthen the country's capacity to adopt these measures. Okay, so one of the objectives of the bill is that we know that we cannot adopt it as we are right now today, but over time we're going to build the country's capacity to adopt these measures. So one of it is to use less electricity energy at home. So use more solar.
Okay.
Like turn off the light when you're not using it. This cannot be too difficult. And we try to buy appliances that use lower energy and see measures of adopting solar or wind, other alternatives for power over time. So you could have maybe solar-powered freezers or solar-powered light bulbs, solar-powered things that right now today you could use solar for. I think that everybody should find a way to start reducing their use of fossil fuel or regular electricity. Another simple thing that we could do is to have different garbage bins for our trash, for our waste. So you have a separate bin for paper, a separate bin for things, and a separate bin for food.
Do you think that will be achievable, though?
Hello?
Do you think that will be achievable? Do you think that, Nigerians will be open to that?
So I know it will take a while, but I think that it can be done.
Okay.
Because I have done it, and I have a couple of friends who are trying it. So we could start it to the level that we can do it. So it just means you should have a separate bin for food, and a separate bin for paper, and maybe 3 bins in your place and your house. And I think that one of the instruments that can be used to make sure that this happens is the waste disposal system. If the waste disposal system collects waste separately, so if you have not separated your waste, it would not be collected. So there are a lot of things we need to get right for this to be properly enforced.
Now,
that system has to be working for us to do that. Another option is, I'm just giving a few examples.
You're right.
Another one is for us to buy and eat seasonal foods, local and seasonal foods. Buy and eat local and seasonal foods, the ones around us, because of the alternative agricultural process that goes into making foods that are not GMO, that are not seasonal and that are not growing in our climate.
Right.
Yeah. So, but if we just stop to what is produced in our climate, what is available in our climate, of course, there's a whole other conversation with farmers on climate smart alternative agriculture. Okay, but for instance, the kinds of fertilizers we use. So it is actually better to reduce methane emissions to use compost fertilizers, natural-based fertilizers.
Okay.
But this is not available in the country. I think we have only one company that is making it, and they can't even provide for the entire country. They can't distribute to the entire country. Their capacity is pretty low. So when you say things like that, you need to make sure that it can actually work. So the part about what you and I can do, already there are companies providing solar-based solutions, but at the moment they are very expensive. And part of the reason they are expensive is because adoption is low. But as adoption increases and there are systems in place for them to function profitably, the prices will come down. So how would that happen? You and I should adopt some of those solutions. And then, like the issue about separating bins, maybe there might be some kind of reward systems for doing it. And then teaching children from the secondary school age to adopt it and take it home and practice it at home. Because it seems in our family system, it's mostly the younger or the youngest person that is responsible for bin collection and certain things. So if the younger people learn it in their secondary schools and they're able to put systems and get everyone to practice it at home, we might save the next generation. Yeah.
Now, I'd like to ask a few questions off of what you just talked about. The first would obviously be in response to our waste management system, bringing it down to the state levels across all states in Nigeria. And there's been lots of calls for better performance from our waste management systems at the state levels. Now, based on that premise, do you think that as leaders in Nigeria, be you at the local government level, at the state level, and even the federal level, do you think that we are aware, that is, we're informed of the importance of some of these measures, for example, that of waste management, in helping our environment and our climate? The reason I ask that is because we find that for our waste management system, for instance, there's been lots of calls, for instance, here in River State for a better performance from the system, and that has not been implemented. So would you say that is because even some of our leaders are not aware of the importance and the impact of such laxity and complacency with our waste management systems and how it affects our climate? And if so, the flip side to that question will be, how can we better inform our leaders, people who are in positions of authority, so that we do not just have people like you, people who are professionals within the climate and environmental conditions, championing this cause, but we have every single leader in seats of authority pushing for this as well?
Okay, thank you for this question. So, first of all, many of the leaders that we have, especially at state level, local government level, do not have very low awareness of this, and they prioritize other things. So there are other things that are more important to them than the climate change. They have other priorities. There's nothing to them. There's no emergency here. So the second part of it, apart from our leaders, in this country we are CBOs, that's community-based organizations, environmental-based organizations, people activists who should create awareness, speak up on the street, because this is how it is done in other countries. People, they're NGOs, CBOs who drive this kinds of conversation until they have created enough awareness and they have stopped and interrupted the government of the day to say, stop what you're doing and listen to us. There is an emergency. This must be done now. And based on that, we now respond, because creating awareness is one step, but it is not enough. So it is part of the objective of this bill. The bill will create public awareness, both for the government, for private sectors, for individuals, and everyone. I look forward to seeing how it will be implemented, but also our local activism systems, our community-based organizations, NGOs, and environmental bodies would actually speak up, take action, lobby, get in the faces of the leaders, talk to them. Everyone should get it done, because this is how, if you go out and see how it is done around the world, they block the streets. They carry and say, stop, listen to me, this must be done now. They speak to their neighbors, they talk to the next person doing this. Everyone who knows, talk to the person beside him, says, why are you doing this? If everyone builds the wall in front of them, the whole country will build. So everyone is taking action. Organizations are giving us something to rally around, and we interrupt the government of it, because this is not a priority in the country right now. There are bigger issues. There's conflict, there's poverty, there's so many things. They say, don't worry, we'll get back to the environment and the atmosphere later. We can buy AC. It's not that hot. We can move to higher ground when flooding happens. But just so we need to interrupt the day and say, no, we need to take actions now. So the leaders have to be jolted to respond to us.
No, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because in very recent time we've been experiencing more flooding across the country.
Yeah.
People are being displaced from their homes and their farmlands and everything they know life to be because of flooding. There's a comment here on our Facebook page. Remember, you can join the conversation. Whatever questions you have listening right now, you can call in or send a message on WhatsApp or on Facebook to ask. So on Facebook, Ken Ekurube says, there is no such thing as human-caused climate change. The change in climate conditions is a natural phenomena. How do you respond to this blessing?
So when I started the conversation in definition, it is actually it happens naturally. So it is climate change is a long-term shift. So it would happen and occur naturally. However, human activities aggravate. So the word here is human activities aggravated the process. So what we are trying to do, it will happen, and the climate has changed over time. But there are things that we can do to minimize, to slow down the time of to slow down what is happening. So it would happen over time. But if we continue the way that we have continued, we are aggravating it, and it is happening sooner than we planned, or sooner than it should happen. Because we've been on Earth for millions of years. However, we have seen the extreme changes. So there are two things to do. One, minimize our own activities that aggravate it, and then to come up with mitigation action to manage it.
So
that is my response. It's correct that it is, we are not the original cause. We are just aggravators.
Exactly. So the things that we're doing, our decisions are obviously just worsening what is going on. Right. So apart from waste, for instance, like you mentioned, managing our waste better, how else can we help this problem?
Okay, so I've mentioned what individuals can do, but then I also now talk about what companies, because there's a whole ecosystem of what is costing this on another level. So let me go back to what individuals can do.
Yes.
So
hold that thought. Hold that thought. We do have a call coming in. We'll come back to that shortly. Good afternoon. You're welcome. Hello. Are you there? All right. I think we lost that call. Go ahead, Blessing.
Okay, so I was going to talk about what we could do as individuals. Then I will now come to organizations. Right. So as individuals, one, minimize wastage, save energy, reuse, recycle, repair, choose eco-friendly products. Speak up about, speak to your leaders, speak to others. Then on the use of, generally as an economy, part of the things that aggravate this is clearing out large areas of forest. So we have to have systems of coexisting with some forest. So it's called agroecology or agroforestry. So we need to learn ways of coexisting with our ecosystem instead of clearing it out. So building smart cities, smart economies, smart locations where there are trees, there are plants, and there are houses, within the same environment. And then the big elephant in the room, which is fuel, petroleum products, the use of petroleum products, and it's coal, oil, gas, and all of those products. It is the reason why countries that are able are switching to electric-based cars. And there's now a further switch to solar energy. So the vehicles are powered by machineries, and vehicles are powered by solar energy as against electricity. So it's one step to reduce gas, the use of gas, coal, and it. But we know that right now we are heavily dependent on economics from that. So that is the big elephant in the room. That's another conversation. However, I think where we could start from is what do we do when there is environmental pollution as a result of these things, field fires, oil pollution in the ocean, oil spills in the cities and communities. So how do we respond to those? So these are some other actions that we need to look at.
No.
apart from what individuals need to do. So we need to work with the private sector to discuss how we can mitigate these things and still have a thriving economic growth in the country.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to ask about how it has impacted our economy. Do you think perhaps that, that of course we can't deny, the impact it has had on our economy here in Nigeria. Talk about businesses that have been affected, people's sources of livelihoods taken away from them, for instance, from flooding and all of that. How do you anticipate that perhaps in the nearest future we could, to a very large degree, tackle this issue of climate change, and how do you see that impacting on our economy?
So right now, what I see is the plan is to reduce this gradually. The biggest contributor to our GDP in Nigeria is still the agricultural sector.
Okay.
It contributes much more than the oil sector. It's just that we have there's a system that the oil fund is used for around our budget. So there's a system that promotes running the country through the funds from oil. However, the GDP is gotten mostly from agriculture. So I see us focusing a lot on climate smart agriculture. If we get it right with agriculture, and we put fully, and then we put systems in place to reduce the impact of oil emissions and gas and coal and all of that. It's a long journey, and there will be lots of discussions around it. So we'll look at all the economic alternatives we have available in the country, all the options. We put all the options on the table, and decide how to sustainably tackle climate change without affecting our economy. Of course, this is one of the reasons why many of the people in leadership are not discussing this, because there is a big fear that it would impact on our finances.
Right.
But if we get it right with agriculture, which is the biggest contributor, we start to discuss and look at alternatives around oil, and look at what we can do sustainably to still live and function with oil without creating impact on the environment. So these are conversations that need to be discussed over time. Research has to be done. We need to test models to eventually identify what will work for our country.
Awesome, Blessing. I'd like your final words as we wrap up the conversation now. How would you wrap the conversation up, Blessing?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So just in closing, while climate change is not something that belongs in text or in the news or somewhere, if we could look every day, walk out on the streets every day, we would see the impact and the effect of climate change in our economy, in our homes, with all of us. So we cannot leave the role of climate change mitigation to the government or to the leaders or to other people. Every one of us has to take responsibility for our part, take action, and we can do our best to reduce our contribution to aggravation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time and for your resources. I deeply appreciate you joining me on the conversation. Have yourself a great afternoon.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. Thank you.
All right. So I have been speaking to Blessing Adebayo. She is an international development professional on climate change. And that was the conversation. Remember, and I do hope that you always remember this, that you also play a part in whether there's a decline or an improvement in our climate. And that obviously lies on your shoulders and the decisions you make with your waste, the foods you choose to eat, and everything that you choose to do. Remember that as you step into the new week. 1 o'clock happens in 5 minutes, the news update, and right after